And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Lee Papa, who went through a transformation through the journey of a near-death experience, which we're going to learn about and more. Lee, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are excited to have you here today, Lee. And if you don't mind, let's start on the day that you had this NDE and go from there.
Great. Well, it was a beautiful summer day in Las Vegas in September of 2008. And I had been ill. I had had what I thought was an upper respiratory condition, and I was on antibiotics, but they weren't working. And I found that my husband at the time was on a retreat for 10 days of noble silence, Vipassana, it's called. And so he was unable to be reached. And my elderly mother was living with us at the time, and I couldn't even whisper to call her. And I had my son, who was 2 years old at the time, and it was getting scary because I was in bed and I could feel my spirit lifting out of my body. And although that wasn't the part that was scary, what was scary is that I knew that my elderly mother wouldn't know what to do if she found that I had passed, and she might have a heart attack, or, I didn't want to put her through that trauma. And I was worried because I didn't know what my son was up to. And so I was able to grab the phone, contact my girlfriend who lived in the neighborhood, and get my son. And when she did that immediately, I felt more relaxed, that I was able to kind of let go, and that's exactly what happened. I remember just being in the darkness at first in my thoughts, and then I let go and let my spirit lift outside my body, and then I was in the light. And it is the whitest and brightest of lights. Instantly, I felt relief. I felt um, peace. I felt elation. And I didn't have a body, and I didn't have any qualms about not having a body. And I just felt, oh, this is it. This is what is truth. And I then noticed that there were two beings coming towards me from off in the distance, which was interesting because it was like being in a cloud of white light. And yet I knew that I was this white light and that these beings were of light, but you could see there was I could feel the differentiation of the light that was the external light and then the light that was the beings. And they were morphing in and out of singular to then into two human form light beings. And I could see the outline of them. And the one on the left was a little taller, a little fuller, felt masculine. The one on the right was a little smaller, felt feminine. And they started to communicate with me telepathically. And I felt instinctively that they had a job to do, that they were chosen for this particular job. I didn't know them. They weren't any religious figure or any family member. But I just knew that they had a job to do. And so they communicated that it was free will. I had free will, that I could choose to continue on to go beyond, or go back to my physical form. And I wanted to keep going to what I felt was home, and very excited about that. I described it as like getting off of a roller coaster where you were excited about going on the roller coaster, and it was, all these twists and turns, and your stomach was jumping, and then it was like very exhilarating, lots of obstacles, and then you come into the platform, and you're like, wow, that was a really great ride, but I don't want to do that again. That's what it kind of felt like. It felt like that life, the human form, the experience that I had on Earth was like a roller coaster, and it was exhilarating, but I was ready to go. And these beings said to me, "We are going to move you through what I was calling a relationship review." I know some NDEers have full visual life reviews, and I didn't have that. I had more of feeling, where every relationship that was significant would wash over me, and I would feel the feeling of the relationship, the wisdom, the knowledge from the experience, the love, the extraordinary love of the experience. And then once that would dissipate, the next one would come and the next one would come. Interestingly enough, only two I remembered coming back, which was my husband, Jean Pierre, in the book, and then my son. And they left my son for last. So during the I'm gonna go back to my husband. At the time, we were in a very challenged time of our relationship. It was not going well. The little bit of the backstory was that he was in a major car accident, and that changed the trajectory of our lives, and chronic pain changes people. And so we were dealing with all of that pre-near-death experience. And so at the time, I wouldn't say that I was in full expression of love for my husband. There was a lot of conflict. And yet on the other side, I just felt this extraordinary love for him, and the appreciation of the wisdom and knowledge that came from that experience of being with him. And then when that experience washed away, then my son came, and oh, it was softer and more precious and just beautiful, pristine love. And I was so grateful to have the experience of birthing and mothering this child, and it was just so yummy and beautiful. And then when the feeling dissipated, I still was in this place of, okay, that was amazing. So let's go now. I still didn't want to come back. And anyone that is listening, that and you yourself, Jeff, when you have children, you are attached, right? I was considered a helicopter mom. He was my only one, and I was very, very attached to him. But on the other side, there's just this extraordinary love that we do not have the vocabulary, or really the ability to feel, because we have attachment. And this was just so extraordinary, so different. And so these beings said, okay, so you don't have all the full information, and that you need to make this decision. And the full information is that this little being, known as Luke in the book, would not be able to fulfill his destiny if he would lose his mother at such a young age. He has lost his mother previously. And so this is a very important factor. And you will need to feel the feeling of what he will feel at the loss of his mother at such a young age. So the emotion comes up. Hmm, for the first 6 months to a year after the near-death experience, I couldn't even tell this portion of the story. I would just start sobbing. But the pain was so deep. It felt like shards of glass ripping through my soul. And so feeling the feeling of that, I came back and said, "Okay, you win. Um, I will come back and be this beautiful soul's mother until he doesn't need me anymore. And I will." Part of the deal was that I would do the work of the light, and but I had this negotiation, this side negotiation, and I said, "But I don't want to have some long, drawn out illness. When I'm ready to go, I want to be able to come home." And with that, I got an acknowledgement of a yes, and I was back in my body. And from a deathbed illness to sitting straight up and saying, what just happened to me? Because I didn't know about really near death experiences per se. I didn't know that that's what that was. I was calling it a fantasy of death, but everything was gorgeous. Everything was beautiful and alive and glowing. And I just sat in my bed looking at absolutely everything from the walls to the furniture to the door in all its hinges and doorknob with such appreciation and acknowledgement of beauty that I was like, whoa, something seriously is going on here and I need to get some help. And that's when I sought out some assistance. I called my sister, and then from that point, I contacted a friend who then referred me to someone else who is a spiritual coach and guide, and she's the one that gave me the terminology, gave me the words for near-death experience.
Lee, thank you for sharing your experience with us.
My
Can you
pleasure.
tell us more about the deal that you made with the work of the light? And is that your purpose here, or do you feel that your purpose is or was taking care of your son?
I think that it was twofold. I think the main purpose was my son. But to be able to do that and to give him the tools that he needs, I needed to go through a major healing process in myself, which I continue to do today. We're always evolving and healing and growing and expanding, and I do believe that that is our purpose on our earthly experience, is to really come to the understanding of what we are and who we are, um, and it's all an inside job, right? So, my son, I was a single mom, so my husband and I did divorce, and not too long after the near death experience, a couple years, 2, 3 years, and um, and so I was predominantly raising him with this new understanding. And so I believe that that was also part of me doing the work of the light, is to also, as I was healing, as I was understanding and growing, that I was able to then instill that within him. And I didn't really know what the work of the light was. I came back with new awarenesses and what some people call gifts, but I would say that these are gifts that we all have, that we've just kind of been programmed out of us, whether they're clairaudient or empathic. There are so many that we have access to. And so as I was healing my own struggles, because I looked outside myself for everything, prior to the near death experience, my life was full of drama, full of contrast, full of obstacles. And I was looking for answers, but always looking for answers externally, and felt that it was all happening to me until I learned that it was all happening for me so that I could get to this place of healing. And, we all have stories and we all have specific obstacles, and whether it's, um, taking in an elderly parent and dealing with that, having an alcoholic father, dealing with relationship issues, financial issues. We all have some sort of contrast that is here to teach us about ourselves. And so over this last 10 plus years, let's see, well, the original book was in 2000, and when did I write that? 2014. So then the second edition, 24. So during that time, even before I wrote the book, there was all of this time of healing and understanding and self-observation that was evolving and helping me to understand how to move through these obstacles and this pain and suffering so that I could then help other people, which I was guided to do uh, intuitively through my guidance. I make this gesture because this is where that intuitive drop in comes in, and that's where I hear it. And I was guided to open a wellness center in 2009, so a year after, and that set me on a trajectory of supporting others in healing and well-being as well.
I'm sure I've heard this before, but this is the first time I think that it really made sense for me. And what that is everything's happening for us, not to us. and how to reframe all your problems in your life or all the things, all our obstacles. And I love that.
Thank you. And that was a big lesson for me because I realized in retrospect how I had led my life as a victim, even though I didn't think I did. Uh, I don't think we ever do. But through the inner work, and it is work, there's no doubt about it, but it is work that is so worth it because how do you know that how do you truly understand light if you haven't understood darkness, right? I'm looking at the back of your screen, right, in the beautiful sky and all the darkness, but all these specks of light. So beautiful. And um, and that's what we need. We need that contrast. I utilize in the trainings that I do a lot of these little catchphrases that came to me that I think are really great phrases to just keep in our mind as we're navigating this life. And one of them is contrast brings clarity. Right? It is our best teacher. And when you really start doing the deep dive work, you start to acknowledge and understand that this contrast, when it comes, you take a beat. You don't lean in. So I'm actually gonna jump into some mindfulness kind of tools, and that is mindfulness at its simplest form equals awareness. Awareness of your thoughts and actions in the world around you. But here's the drum roll in non judgment, right? So, who do we judge the most? Everybody gets this right. 100%. We judge ourselves the most, right? So, we have to start here. And when we are in the middle of drama and chaos and conflict, we're leaning in. We are literally leaning in as the participant in that. And you're leaning in when there is a tornado around you and when there's lots of triggers, you are leaning into that. But in mindfulness practice, we lean out, we become the self observer. And when we become the self observer, we can see the contrast that is coming our way as a reflection of something we need to learn within ourselves. And that's the work. There's a free book on my site. I think I sent you the link. It's called The Roadmap to Living Mindfully Understanding Self Love, Self Care, and Self Mastery. It's a free booklet and it's a great foundational piece when we get started on this self observation work because without self love and self care, we will never get to self mastery. So we have to be gentle with ourselves in this time of great contrast in the world. And if we find that we are judging externally extensively, it's because we're judging so much ourselves. So we need to be kind, nourish ourselves mindfully, give from the overflow, and really start taking baby steps. It's about the baby steps consistently every day. And before you know it, you're going to look back at the younger version of yourself with such compassion because I know for myself, it was exhausting being me before. And now I love life.
Two questions. I'll just give you
Okay.
both and then you can answer them. One is, what were your spiritual beliefs prior to the NDE, as well as what were you doing professionally?
Thank you. I'll take the spiritual beliefs first. I as a young person, I would say in 12, 13, 14, I was born and raised Catholic. Let's just start there. My dad studied to be a priest before he got married. My mother completely devoted to the Blessed Mother. But we went to church, but as my mother was having her own struggles, and I have two older sisters, and she was really challenged with her marriage and with raising the kids. She had some obstacles, and she stopped going to church. But I was involved with the church until this is a side story. Until something happened that made me think that this there's something more, and that it's bigger than what I'm being taught. And I remember this one time, my mom saying to me, who do you pray to? And I thought it was a trick question. I remember driving in the car. She's like, who do you pray to? And I was like, God. right? Who do you pray to? And she was like, oh, you go direct. But she was praying to the Blessed Mother and to Joseph and to Saint Anthony and a slew of other saints, um, for intervention. And I just never did that. I always just had a relationship with God. And as I got older, I started seeking other or seeking the understanding of other beliefs. So I explored Buddhism, I explored Baptist, I explored New Age. That was probably the longest one. And really, as I got older and moved from Baltimore, Maryland to Los Angeles, I really got involved with understanding more about spirituality, manifestation, things like that. Uh, so I considered myself spiritual. That's when I started saying I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience. I was always a seeker, a truth seeker, and I knew that there was more to what we call religion. And at the time of the NDE, I would say I was still kind of there, um, but always evolving, always exploring, always expanding. Um, when kind of an interesting point about that is I also believe in Jesus. I believe in Jesus's existence, and I believe in saints. I believe in the Blessed Mother. Um, but I didn't start reading the Bible until just recently when I moved to Missouri a couple years ago and really read the Bible for the first time. And again, another side story. But what I found interesting is that I wasn't greeted by any religious figure or by anyone that I knew, but by these beings that I really didn't have a vocabulary for, except for that they were light. So it's not like I studied light beings. I didn't even know there would be a study of a light being. Um, but while I was writing the book, I did meet someone at a coffee shop that knew I was writing a book about my near death experience. And she shared that her husband had a near death experience and they are Christian, and that he was met by religious figures and angels. And she had said at the end of her story, which was glorious and beautiful, um, I'm glad we were right. And it got me thinking about that my NDE was no less profound than what her husband's or her experience was, and yet they were very different. And so, uh, do we have our NDEs based on our beliefs? I don't know. So, that answers the first question, and then the second question, what I was doing for a living, I actually uh, had a business with a friend where we were doing real estate, and this is when it first started to become popular to do online trade magazines. So moving away from the physical magazine, and I was doing a online trade magazine and doing interviews and writing a blog. And after the NDE, I woke up with this new awareness that continued on and continues today with expanded awareness and understanding. And I also woke up with half my face paralyzed the next day. And um, and in doing that, I realized that my stress level was so high, and that's why I was ill all the time and why I was constantly saying I was sick, and I was always sick because I constantly was saying I was always sick. It was just a vicious cycle. And then that illness that I had manifested into Bell's palsy. And I had gone to the hospital and said, I had absolutely no fear about it. I didn't feel like it was a stroke, even though it could have been. Um, but I just dropped my son off to daycare, went to the hospital, the emergency room. I was like, can you do something about this? And they were in panic mode and rushed me back. And I had absolutely no fear at all, which was, again, not me prior to the near death experience.
Would you say that the place or the realm that you went to was like a holding place?
Yes, it's exactly what I call it. Is I called it a kind of a way station, a platform, a tweener place It and yet not a place at all, which was interesting. Even though I felt my spirit lift outside my body, I still felt like it was just in everything and was everything, and it was a place but a not place. But definitely I had not broken through, so there was no tunnel. I knew that it was a place in between. That's why I just wanted to, like, uh, accommodate these two light beings to whatever it is that they wanted, so that I could keep going, because I was ready and excited. I wanted to keep going.
If you had a friend that was suffering over the loss of a loved one, what type of advice would you give?
Mm, what a great question, Jeff. So there are many things I want to say about this, but grief is a very personal thing, and people grieve very differently. And just sitting with a friend and letting them go through their process and just holding a space for them without leaning in. And what I mean by that is that whole idea of observer versus leaning in. When we are empathic, and so many of us are, and those who aren't officially empathic just haven't opened up yet to that. But we are very feeling, sentient beings. Um, we are empathic, and so we can feel the feelings of people. So without leaning into the grief, but sitting with the person, whether it's on the phone or in person, and just holding space for them to go through their process of grieving. Number one. um, Doing the work that I do, uh, I work a lot with people that are grieving, and quite frankly, I believe that the whole world is grieving, that we are all in a process of PTSD. We've had trauma like we have never experienced, and it is still snowballing because there have been so many people passing and transitioning. But what I know to be true, and I say it this way because truth is a very personal thing as well. What I know to be true for me today, because even in reflecting back of the book that I wrote 10 years ago, when I read it, I was like, oh, my beliefs have been altered over my healing process. And so we need to be open to evolving and letting people also in our lives go through their own process of evolving. But what I know to be true for me today is, and they're the major takeaways of my NDE, is one, there is no death, there's only life. Two, there's no attachment. There's just only love, which is number three. So I have been blessed to be able to communicate with my mother who has transitioned, and she confirmed what I knew to be true at the time of my near death experience, and that we do carry on and we do live um, a much better, brighter life than the contrast that we have here. But we needed this contrast so that we could grow, so that we could expand, so that we could become um, more awakened to the powerful beings that we are, that are pure light and love. And I think helping people understand that it's not the end, and that you will see your loved ones again, and that you can communicate with them. Um, I hope gives them some peace. Um, I also believe that in our own healing, in our own process of healing, no matter what the contrast is, whether it's grieving or suffering in other ways, that we go through the process of healing that also allows us to be more peaceful about those transitioning. I have been with loved ones who have transitioned, and when the body is left, it is it is an empty vessel. The soul, the spirit is truly who we are, and that never goes away. And it is always with us. Our loved ones are with us. So I hope that helps listeners who are grieving and who have lost find some peace. And to also understanding the purpose of our lives here, and that we, just like I did, some of us really do get to choose whether we stay or whether we go because we have that free will. And knowing what our purpose is here, I think is also a very healing process. I was given this channel, if you will, this guidance that came through me during the writing of the book that I I love to share because it helps us understand what our purpose is. And if you allow me, I will read that.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm gonna get my specs on. Okay.
Great glasses, by the way.
Thank you. Love enters us from a well of existence that is streaming from the natural source. We do not own it. It flows freely and is given with no requirement or judgment of its use. It is the life force of all creation. I am here to tell you that this life force runs through each and every one of you and each and every one of all living beings in the cosmos. If you could glimpse for just one moment the purity of the light of all existence, the same moment that we allowed Lee to experience and to draw upon for her strength in her journey as she continues to expand into the being that she already is, it would most definitely change you. The worry and the fear that penetrates every layer of your current existence would vanish like a streak of lightning in the night sky. It would melt all worry and darkness from your hearts and fill you with the light of love for all mankind. There would be no differences, no wars to fight, no burdens of finance, as with this love, all things for all people are possible. Your limited knowing of what the light is the only problem or issue that you need to resolve. The only issue. As once the clarity is yours, you will no longer seek anything but the essence that is the light of pure energy. You see, the strength that is the you that you do not know is just below the surface to be uncovered by you. This is the journey you see. It is the unveiling of the shell that you have encrusted upon yourself in darkness so that you can see again. The world is your playground, your playhouse, and your school, and it is that for each and every one of you. Some of you see now, and some of you are beginning to see. It is a joyous, it is a joyous occasion for all of those who are able to see this unfold. It is glorious in many ways as your existence is unfolding in the hands of those who seek. You are the beauty and the life of all beings and all people, and the sages of the old ways will no longer be the ones that those follow, as the followers will be only you in your own path of seeking. This is true for all. Do not seek to find what is already within you. The path to the enlightened is with you.
You mentioned that this book was channeled. Can you tell us more about your channeling ability and how this all works for you?
Sure. The that section was channeled. And I started very simply by I had heard about automatic writing and did a meditation. This was pre near death experience, I believe. Yes. Um, and I sat there quietly meditating, and I was a complete control freak, by the way, prior to. That's how I manage my safe zone. That's what I thought. If I can control everything and everyone, that I would feel safe. Um, so at that time, then I would hold the pencil and I would meditate, and nothing would happen. And so my guides would give me these little tools um, to start letting go and start trusting. And in that process, it doesn't happen overnight, but in that process of learning to meditate, getting out of my own way, healing the places within me that needed to be healed. I started to hear more And then I would sit at my computer, and I would know, it was just instinctively, I would know that this, I would get like either a very high pitch in my hearing, or I would just feel a higher vibrational being with me. And people would call that a spirit guide, could be. And I would sit at my computer and I would ask a question, and then it would just, and again, I'm bringing it into this part of my consciousness. This is where I would get the information. So when I'm just thinking a thought, I can differentiate the difference. The It's more of a drop in of a dialogue. It could also just be a word where it just drops in out of nowhere. And over time and practice, I've just been able to hone it. It's kind of like learning a new vocabulary. And so I just started typing what would come, and some of it, Jeff, was very profound. And I would joke because I'm like, I'm of average intelligence. And so I was like, there's no way that came from me, because it was eloquent and beautiful, um and deep and expanded, and things that I wouldn't have come up with or thought of. And that started that process. And sometimes I do it a lot, and sometimes I don't do it at all. It kind of comes and goes when I choose it, when I choose to connect with it. And over time, I've learned to I've channeled other beings of the light, because there are beings that are not of the light and that want to interfere with you. And I've learned that the hard way as well, how to be very cautious and discerning, and always protecting through Creator, God, Source, the Divine Universe, Spirit, whatever name you choose to use for all that is. I have a dialogue with the Holy Spirit every day.
If we get back to everything is happening for us, whenever you have an obstacle in your life and you remember that, does that help you remove the obstacle quicker?
It does. I could give you a slew of obstacles or contrast that I go through on a daily basis. And, from having a flat tire the other day going to an event, to then going to Costco to get my tire replaced and knowing that now I need to have two tires replaced. Um, Again, you can lean into those, and um, and have a perspective from a space of lack, uh, or you can be the observer and come from a space of gratitude. Uh, I chose, and I hope that I choose that more than I choose the alternative, the negative alternative, which after a lot of years of practice, I do. But I'm human, right? So every once in a while you can get a trigger. But I tend to come from a place of gratitude, because I know the Creator is always vying for my highest and best, always. And it may look like contrast to me, but I know my Creator has got my back. And so I look at that and I say, wow, how grateful I am that I didn't have a blowout on the freeway that caused an accident. How lucky I am that, oh, because I had to get a tire replaced, that second tire that really needed to be replaced now got replaced. How lucky am I that I had the money in my bank account that I could take care of those two tires? How grateful I am for the contrast, because it is my greatest teacher, and I know that I am forever and always growing and expanding through the light, Creator, God, Source. And so it does dissolve all of that angst, all of that contrast of energy, because we've been programmed and trained, at least I have been from little up, that we lift all the negativity up. Like, someone is sick and you lift them up, oh, poor so and so. I grew up with that, right? Oh, poor so and so, they have an illness, or oh, poor so and so, they lost their job. It was all a perspective of the negative side. Just like a coin has two sides, we live in a duality experience. We can choose the perspective. And we've been programmed to choose the negative perspective predominantly, we have to train ourselves with every thought and every action through mindfulness training is a beautiful way to start choosing the other perspective, to start choosing gratitude. Thank you for that. I don't know why it had to happen, but I know you have my back. I know, Creator, that you really live here. You're not outside of me, that you are here with me always, and you are always taking care of me. So I'm grateful.
Lee, I understand that you do energy healing. Is that something that came naturally, or is it a result of your NDE?
There's a great story about that with Reiki. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Reiki, energy healing?
Sure.
Okay, great. And if your audience is not, it's spelled Reiki, Reiki, and it's a Japanese form of energy healing, and it's basically also a channeling, right? It is the energy moves through the crown chakra and out through the hands of the practitioner. Um, and that's really where I started with energy healing. I have many um, energy tools, if you will, in my spiritual tool belt. But that was the first one that that came into my existence, and it definitely was. It was meant to be. So the stars aligned for it to happen. And I won't go into all the details of how that happened, but so I started doing energy work via uh, Reiki, and I never in a million years thought that I would be that person, right? That because it is such a loving, fully in service, even though, you know, you get paid to do it, right? But it's not about that. It is really just being with that being, and feeling the energy and allowing the energy to move through you, so that you can channel it to where it needs to be, and it's gentle and it's powerful and it's beautiful. I love Reiki. Um, and so when that started again, prior to 2008, uh, that was a next level up for my own personal healing because it really starts with the personal healing and then supports others in the same. And as anyone who does energy work, you know that as you are supporting others in their healing, you are always healing. It's a very beautiful process. Over the years, that has changed. The energy work has changed from being in person to doing it distance through my coaching work. I also do energy clearings and aligning um, chakras as well as aligning energy bodies. That's something that has been happening a lot lately. You have different energy bodies. The ones that I focus on are the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, and the spiritual body. And often when we feel stuck, or if we're grieving, or if we're going through some emotional turmoil, or if we're in a project and we're noodling, our energy bodies are not aligned. We should be in alignment, all bodies like kind of stacked on top of each other. But often they're out, and we wonder why we're feeling disjointed or uncomfortable. And and so I do that in my coaching calls. And actually, if you're up for it, I can do that for the listeners, the viewers, for
Sure.
everyone.
Sure.
Okay.
Do they need to do anything?
Well, if they're not driving,
I was going to say,
or
if
if
they're
they're not
driving or
right, or
operating heavy equipment, please
that's
come
right, then
back
don't
later
do
and do
this.
this.
Exactly. This is for those who can take a moment, a minute or two, and can become just present with their breath. And it's the coolest thing that I use my body as a pendulum. So it's a kinesiology aspect where I'm muscle testing, and all the listeners, whether you're listening at the same time or any time that you listen, the fact that you are hearing my voice and I'm able to connect to you in that way, because we are all connected in such a vast and expanded way that that this is possible. And so what I just ask you is to just get comfortable in your seat. If you're lying down, that's fine too, and get connected to your breath. Close your eyes And breathe in through the nose for a count of 3, hold for a count of 3, and then exhale through the mouth for a count of 3. And as you're doing that, you're just going to start to relax the physical body. And then I'm going to tap in if for all of you who have given me permission, because there needs to be an energetic permission, you state that you give me permission to do this, and that we are going to then align the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies. And just continue to breathe at your natural pace. And I'll come back to you and bring you back when it is time. Okay, and I'd like everyone to take a nice deep breath, keeping your eyes closed, a nice deep cleansing breath, and exhale through the mouth. Now envision yourself barefoot and in the grass, walking in the grass. I'm just going to ground you right now and grounding into the space and time. Smell the air, it's so fresh and beautiful. And now envision a beautiful column of light coming from way up above your head, shining down upon you. You are inside this column of light now, a luminescent, bright, white light. Beautiful. You can feel it vibrating. It is so comforting and loving. It's like you are in a womb. It is so beautiful. This light is going to amplify your existing vibration, just giving you a little boost to help support you in your healing and well-being, smoothing out your emotions, supporting you in your purpose, aligning you with happiness, mindfulness, joy, peace, love, acceptance. Take a nice deep breath and exhale through the mouth. As you exhale, this light is retreating back to where it came. And you can begin to return back to this space and time, wiggling your fingers and toes. If you feel like like to take another deep breath, you can do that now. And when you're fully present and back, you can open your eyes. Ah,
Thank you for sharing that with us, Lee.
it's my pleasure.
Before we started, you mentioned something about the future. Are you clairvoyant? And if so, what are you seeing in our future, at least the near future?
I do not have clairvoyance. I have had prophetic dreams, and they feel very different than a regular dream. I put dreams into 3 categories. Regular subconscious working out stuff dreams, message dreams that you wake up and you can connect the dots of messages, and it has a certain vibration to it. And then prophetic dreams where the things happen or the future. Um, some of the things that I have felt were prophetic dreams have not come to fruition, and they are dark. They were dark. And I believe we've moved past that timeline. I've been given guidance about uh, as humanity is waking up and why 2020 and COVID provided such a contrast for people, right? Contrast brings clarity, brought such a contrast for many to wake up, and wake up to their spiritual nature, wake up to what's happening in the world, wake up to their own power and truth. There are many levels of this. Um, I believe the future is now extraordinary, is beautiful. When I tap into the future, it feels more like or closer to the other side than the contrast that we have lived in what some would call hell on earth, right? A lot of darkness. But we are moving in the right direction. And as we take responsibility for our own healing through what I love is using mindfulness as the platform because awareness and non judgment. We must heal ourselves before we can even think about changing anything in our external because everything is a reflection of what's going on inside of us. So when we understand and heal within ourselves, focusing on like that channel, what the light is, then we amplify that out in the world. And if you can imagine when we become healed and we can amplify that in the world, then it's a exponential, it's a ripple effect. And so I truly believe that we are moving in that direction. But just like the birthing process, it's very painful. And it's painful with ourselves going through our own healing, dark nights of the soul, you know, having memories and awarenesses that bubble up because it's time for us to address those and clearing that out, dealing with our anger and our resentment and our relationship issues and our self loathing and clearing all of that out so that we can expand into the beings that we already are. This process is a process. So I don't know how long it's gonna take because there is no space and time right on the other side. So I don't know what the lines are, but I do know I can feel when we jump a timeline. Um, and I've felt many of those over the last few years.
I thought it was interesting that you mentioned ringing in the ear as some sort of sign that your guide was here.
I first started getting that when after I was attuned to Reiki, and it as I was starting to settle at night, I would get almost like Morse code, "Doo, doo, 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 doo," and I would joke with my husband. He was very patient with me at the time. Uh, he's still patient with me, but I would say, "I think they're trying to reach me," like ET, phone home. But what I learned having the wellness center because um, at its largest incarnation, we had a 6,000 square foot wellness center. We had in 6 years that it was open, we did over 4,000 classes. Tens of thousands of people came through there. We had international travelers, speakers, all kinds of things. But during that time is really when I started to kind of cut my teeth on understanding what was working for the masses and how people were waking up. They were getting the 1111 code. Are you familiar? Sorry,
Yes.
can you hear the dogs?
Yeah, it's not a problem.
Okay. They were getting the 1111 code. Um, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with people seeing 1111 and not understanding why they're seeing an 1111 all the time.
I mean, isn't that basically like an angel number?
Well, some people call it angel number. I've always known it to be an awakening code. So it's like one of the first stages of when you start awakening that you see 1111 all over the place. And it's almost maddening. It's like, how many times can you see it 1111? That's the other time when I started understanding that people were getting this pitch in their ear. It's not really a ringing, it's a high pitch, a frequency. And sometimes very, very high pitch, sometimes not so, sometimes one ear and not the other. Um, and and then our clients, students would go to the doctors and try to figure out why this high pitch, and no one could ever get an answer. They would say that nothing's wrong with your hearing. So I started connecting dots that way, right? And then I started understanding when it was happening to me. whether it was during meditation or when I felt the presence of a being, and the higher pitch seemed to be a higher dimensional being. And I would feel like a wave, almost like a dizziness that would come to very uh, high vibrational beings. And and so I just connected as kind of again that spiritual alphabet. I connected that, and that's what I know to be true for myself. I'm sure there will be others that will say that that is not the case, right? But it is what works for me, and it is my understanding. And it has proven itself time and time and time again.
Your book is called Temple of All Knowing, an exploration of life, death, and spiritual wisdom through a near death experience. What is the main takeaway that someone should get, in your opinion, from reading your book?
I think everything that we've just discussed is a great takeaway. One, first and foremost, that there is no death, and that all that resistance that we have around death is really part of our journey on earth, is to understand that we don't die and utilize this experience on earth as, there's a great country song. I don't know the gal that sings it, but the title is "The House That Built Me." And when I heard it, I was like, "Oh, well, this is what we're doing right now. This is what our Earth experience is. It's the life that built me." Because without the contrast, we have no growth. And on the other side, it's like that multi-million dollar view that, you just see all the time, and then in time it just becomes ordinary. So you're in heaven, I'll air quote heaven, whatever you want to call that, paradise. Um, that we don't have the contrast. It's just glorious and beautiful and life affirming, and um, but in the contrast, it's building us so that we look at contrast differently. And I hope that those who are suffering, whatever it is, whether it's a blown tire or if they're grieving, that they understand that Creator has your back, and that we are here purposefully on the planet, on this time, in this extraordinary time in history, purposefully. And with that, that we start to own our purpose.
Well, if people want to find out more about it, should they go to your website or Amazon?
I don't know, do you put links in your show notes? If you go
Yes.
to the links, the website leepapa.com, and I'd like to send you a link to that free book, because that's a great foundational piece for everyone, and again, free. If they want the book, they can go directly to Amazon, on my website under shop. We can put a link in the show notes. Those are really great places to start, and thank you for that. Also, I have free meditations, and then, my coaching. I would like to offer. I'm going to stop offering it because there's only so many hours in the day. But I want to make sure your audience gets this, and that I offer a free 30-minute coaching session, and you can get that access to that on my website as well. So if they are suffering, or they need some support, at least there's that intro.
Well, after watching this podcast, people may have questions for you. Can they just send you a message through your website?
Yeah, they can send it through my website, or I'm happy to give you my email address. It's Lee, Lee, at leepapa.com. Lee at leepapa.com.
Do you have anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
Ooh, always working on something. I am, I just did the audio version of my book, and I'm noodling on my next book, and it is about expanded experiences, right? So if anyone has had expanded experiences that they can't wrap their head around, or they don't understand, and they're afraid to really ask anybody, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear about that. And kind of want to move away from the stigma of the supernatural, right? And so I am working on that, and also working on connecting with people that do screenplays and teleplays, because we're working on that for Temple of All Knowing.
Before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Nourish yourself mindfully and give from the overflow.
Lee, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Jeff, thank you so much. And thank you for what you do, because it is so, so important in the world that we live in today. And you do a phenomenal job. So thank you. You've been delightful.
Thank you. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.